Halloween's almost here. It's Spooktober. Time for a list of games that we can spend time with our friends, or maybe not with our friends. Maybe our frenemies. Maybe our backstabbing people, because it is Halloween time. But it's time to put together a list of great games to spend time playing this Halloween. Now, the worst thing about all these lists that we put together for Halloween gaming is it's basically just one person sitting there saying, yep, these are games I like. Yep, I like them a lot. It does you absolutely no good at all. How about a list of games that are going to be good for you, no matter who you happen to be? Do you have a big group of friends? I got games for you. Are you going to be the Roy Orbison? You know, only the lonely, all by yourself this Halloween. And I'm sorry, but hey, it could be a fun way to spend your Spooktober Halloween time. But I got games for you. Do you like hidden traders? Do you like worker placement? Do you like dice? Do you like cards? Do you like games? Well, I've broken down 50 games into different categories, and I'm hoping you're going to find a category of games that you can bring out this Halloween, whether it's you in a large group, you in a small group, or you and just you alone having fun this Halloween. Come on back after the break for some shocking and maybe completely electrifying games for Halloween. Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby. On this video, we're looking at Halloween gaming. Now, I've broken down 50 games into various different subcategories so you can find a great, fantastic kind of games, group of games that's going to be perfect for you and your gaming group. What are the categories we have here? Well, the categories are games for large groups, games for medium groups, games for solo gaming, RPGs, dice games, card games, co-op games, competitive games, hidden trader games, because we all like to stab our friends in the back. It is Halloween. Dungeon crawlers, thematic games. You know the ones we used to call Ameritrash? Well, now we call them thematic gaming because it sounds so much cooler. Survival games, worker placement games, and let's not forget the kiddos, because it's also a good time for family gaming. Gaming time to spend time with our loved ones, our families, and even our kids, and enjoy this great gaming hobby, because even though it's Spooktober and Halloween, not all games have to be horrible, scary games. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll make sure I get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off the shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll do my best to answer emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoyed the content, you enjoy the videos I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just $1 tip jar can help me cover my costs. This channel is 100% sponsor free. No games, no gimmicks. I'm not going to tell you about a sponsorship and then tell you about their game and try to tell you that I'm not being influenced at all, because I have no sponsorships. Everything you see from here is out of my own pocketbook. You can help me cover my costs. Toss $1 in a tip jar. It's a fantastic way to say thank you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe, because I'm working on my 10,000 subscribers by my 10-year anniversary. Help me make it to that goal. Let's get on to the games, starting with games for a large group. Arkham Horror 2nd Edition is a 1-to-8 player cooperative game by Richard Lanius, Kevin Wilson, and published by Fantasy Flight Games. We've all played the Arkham Horror style games before. These are basically, you are an investigator and they're played cooperatively. You're basically trying to do your best to stop a great old one from waking up and bringing ruin and damnation to the planet. These games have been out for a long time, but they are still great thematic games. There's a great enjoyment. They play all the way from 1 to 8 players. So yeah, they are cooperative games. It means they could be solo games. But since they play all the way up to 8 players, they also make great games that you can play with a group of people. It will play on the longer side. That's my big caveat to it. But do know that's a great game for larger gaming groups. And the basic idea is you are an investigator in Arkham proper. Every single player controls an investigator, and you're going to explore the city streets of Arkham, dodging the minions of the Great Old Ones, where you unravel a mystery, working towards finding out who the Great Old One is. Well, you basically know who it is, but working towards finding a way to defeat that Great Old One and bringing it to the end, or if things go really, really in your favor, shutting down all the gates, or if things are not in your favor, confronting the Great Old One itself in one final battle between you and your investigators and a creature that man was not meant to know, in its goal to destroy your insanity and destroy your planet. Eldritch Horror is a game for 1 to 8 players. That's a cooperative game by Corey Kaniska, Nikki Valens, and published by Fantasy Flight Games. If you played Arkham Horror, you pretty much have played Eldritch Horror, but instead of being in the city of Arkham, now you're traveling and traversing the great planet itself and trying to cover all the ends of Earth, going to various different places, working together cooperatively as investigators again in the roaring 20s, or sometimes a little more modern times, but you're working cooperatively to hunt down all these workers of the Great Old Ones while trying to work cooperatively to defeat the Great Old One itself. Now, when it comes to Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror, thematically, they're basically the same game. Mechanically, they're very similar to themselves also. They're basically going to be games where rolling dice. You're looking for successes. You're trying to defeat the minions of the Great Old One while you're trying to work on cooperatively shutting down any way the Great Old One can gain access to our planet. Fail to do so, you're going to have to fight the Great Old One, and these are great cooperative games you can play all the way from 1 to 8 players. Cthulhu Wars is a competitive game that plays all the way from 3 all the way up to 9 players. Technically 8, but there's an expansion or a map that should be available pretty darn soon and allows you to play up to 9 players. So for purposes of this video, let's just say 8 players. But in the game of Cthulhu Wars, now instead of you trying to work cooperatively to defeat the old ones, you are the old ones. Now this is a game for 3 to 8 players, designed by Sandy Peterson and put out by Peterson Games. But this is a 100% a war game where the players are controlling a great old one, and your objective is to bring ruin and destruction to the planet while also stopping the other great old ones from doing so. It's a game where you're going to be aggressively attacking other players, rolling dice, using your units, putting them out there, trying to gather all 6 of your spellbooks, because the only way you can win the game is by gathering the most doom while having unlocked all 6 of your spellbooks. Doesn't matter if you have the most doom. If you fail to unlock all your spellbooks, you have failed in completing your task, and the game comes to an end with nobody unlocking their 6 spellbooks. Well, then humanity has been saved. It's a Hail Mary play, but humanity can win in this fully competitive game of Cthulhu Wars. Next up is the game of Werewolf. Werewolf is a party basically game that plays anywhere from 6, I think you probably go down as low as 6 players and go all the way up to 24 players or even more in a great convention environment. Werewolf, you can definitely go very much higher than that. I believe the original designer of this is going to be Dmitry Davidoff, and it is published, well, it's pretty much in the public domain at this time. It's basically a spiritual reinvention of the classic game of Mafia. In the game of Werewolf, this is a game where you're going to have a moderator running the game. But in the game of Werewolf, all the players have basic roles from villagers to other specific roles that may happen to work. And every night, one of the villagers secretly is a werewolf, or maybe a couple of villagers are werewolves. And they are going to decide which one of the villagers is going to die. And the goal of the villagers is to find out who the werewolves are, and the goal of the werewolves are to, well, you don't do that werewolf thing and devour the enemies, because this is very much a social deduction game on a grand scale. It's a great game. It's a wonderful party game. The great advantage of it is it does play fairly quickly while taking in the aspects of an extremely large group. It's a great party game with a whole bunch of different roles, and the fact that one moderator can run the whole thing. And one little caveat, this is definitely one of those games that can really be made by the moderator. A really good moderator can make a game of Werewolf fantastic. A so-so moderator who is very shaky on the rules can cause a little bit of problems. So if you are taking on the role of the moderator, make sure that you understand the role and how the game works. But this is a wonderful party game for a very large group. One Night Ultimate Werewolf is a game for 3 to 10 players of social deduction by Ted Alspach and published by Bezier Games. Now, One Night Ultimate Werewolf takes the game of Werewolf and shrinks what could be a game that can run for a couple hours, depending on how many players you have and how the game is going, and shrinks it down into a bite-sized 5 or 10 minute game that can be played with an app or even played without an app. The basic idea of One Night Ultimate Werewolf, again, for 3 to 10 players, is every single player is going to have a role. Some of the roles really do nothing. They're basically a villager, and you're basically just trying to help deduce who the bad guy is, the werewolf or werewolves, while some of the other players have specific roles. Some of those roles, or I should say most of those roles, are on the side of the villagers. A couple of those roles happen to be sympathizers. They're on the side of the werewolves. If the werewolves win, they also win. But the basic idea of the game is the players are going to be socially trying to figure out within a 5 or 10 minute time limit who happens to be the werewolf or who happens to be the villagers. At the end of a certain time limit, after doing some social deduction based on powers and abilities that were used already and a whole bunch of, let's just say, good old-fashioned chutzpah on the part of the players, players are going to all at one time decide who is going to be basically excommunicated. Well, let's just be very graphic here. Who's going to be killed? Whoever is killed, if it has to be a villager, the werewolves have won the game. If it happens to be a werewolf, then the villagers have won the game. And of course, there's certain side rules which can also break that up depending on if they win or get picked or whatever it happens to be. This is a very strong social deduction game that has a very strong need for very outgoing personalities, because the idea of the game is it's a little bit arguing, but it's definitely a very strong social deduction game where you're trying to bluff and connive and cheat and be a little bit deceitful and argue for your cause, whether it happens to be for the werewolves or for the lowly little villagers themselves. Elder Sign is a dice game for 1 to 8 players. It's designed by Richard Lanius, Kevin Wilson, and again, published by Fantasy Flight Games. This basically takes the idea of the Arkham Horror, the Eldritch Horror, and all those games and those kind of style games and turns them into a fairly little bit faster playing dice game where players again are going to be playing cooperatively. Your objective is to roll dice to go ahead and match dice up to certain symbols that happen to be on cards, whether these cards happen to be gates, happen to be locations, or various different things, or even bad guy enemies. You're basically trying to roll symbols on dice to lock out those certain cards to defeat those cards and remove them from the game, in an effort to get enough points to basically get enough Elder Signs to go ahead and shut down and prevent the Elder Great Old One from waking up. If you manage to get enough Elder Signs, you're going to win. If you fail to do so, the Great Old One is going to wake up and, well, life's going to get a lot more miserable for you. Now, there's a couple different ways you can play the game of Elder Sign. You can play the basic game of Elder Sign, which is just basically a dice game with a whole bunch of random cards coming out of it. Or you can play some of the specific scenarios, and this is how I highly, highly recommend playing the game. There are some fantastic ways to play Elder Sign through the scenarios, and they're going to evolve as a scenario-based game. My personal favorite is the one that takes place in Alaska, well, because that's where I live, and I actually love the references it makes. It's very, very cool, but it's a very thematic game where you can explore different locations. You're still rolling those dice, and it still plays faster than Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror, while giving you that classic Arkham H.P. Lovecraft feel. But it's a game that plays from 1 to 8 players, fully cooperatively, and those stories and the way they work out give you a nice feeling of the Arkham Horror game, just with faster play. And again, more of a dice game where you're matching symbols versus a dice game where you're just looking for 5s and 6s in hopes to defeat the Great Old One. Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space is a team-based game for 2 to 8 players designed by Mario Paporo, Pietro Reiti Riva, and a few other designers whose names I'm going to absolutely butcher, so I'm not going to even try, but it is published by Cranio Creations. And the basic idea of Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space is, again, this is a game for 2 to 8 players, and there's different maps that are going to work great with different player counts. Most of the maps you're going to want to use in this category for the larger play groups are going to be for the 8-player game. But the basic idea is, this is the classic movie The Thing in a hidden movement style game, where every single player is going to have an erasable marker, and you're going to be moving around the board. Various different objectives are going to occur based on whether you're the alien or aliens, or if you're the survivors trying to escape from the spaceship, get to the escape pod and escape with your life and hopefully win the game for your team. Because it's a hidden movement game where you're going to have a map where you're going to be moving to different locations, and you're going to track your movement through an erasable marker style system on these map boards, and different cards are going to come out, and they're going to do different things to kind of change up the rules and help you deduce who the aliens are and help you deduce who the survivors happen to be. Your objective as the aliens is to hunt down the survivors and also infect them. Again, that's where that Thing reference comes from. And your goal as the survivors is to manage to get to the escape pods and escape from this dying ship that has been quickly infected by aliens. It's a 2 to 8 player game that plays absolutely fantastically, and one of the great things about it is this is another one of the games that plays fairly quickly, has multiple different maps which are going to add to the variety and keep this a game that you can play multiple times even during the same night and have a heck of a lot of fun. A Touch of Evil is a cooperative or a competitive game for either 1 to 8 players or 2 to 8 players, designed by Jason Hill and published by Flying Frog Productions. Now, this is back into the category of those super thematic games where you're throwing a whole bunch of dice and trying to get certain results, walking around a board with your individual survivor, your individual hero, your individual investigator. The theme is pretty much the same between Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, and this game right here, but this game adds a little bit of an extra twist. This game takes the concept of you are back in the late 1800s and you're trying to hunt down various different evils, whether it happens to be, not Dracula, I almost said Dracula. Whether you're trying to hunt down a vampire, hunt down the Headless Horseman, hunt down a gargoyle, a witch, a coven, whatever it happens to be, there's many different bad guys that you're hunting down. You're going to go across the board going to different locations. Different events are going to occur every single round, and you're going to be rolling dice, and you're basically going to be playing this game 2 different ways. As a fully competitive game where you're trying to be the one who hunts down the monster, slay the beast, and be the winner of the game, or you're working cooperatively where you're all working together with a community goal of hunting down a much more powerful version of this monster, this beast that you have me hunting down. Every single one of these monsters brings different subordinates and little helpers and henchmen that are help it do its special thing. But what makes this game a little bit different from the Arkham and the Eldritch games is the fact that you have the town councilors or the town government, whatever you want to call it. There's different representatives on the council, and this can be the mayor, this can be a very wealthy person who's part of the community and everything like that. But some of these people might slowly be corrupted by the evil influences of the monster that you're hunting down. As you are using these people, these popular members of the community for their benefits, they also might be working behind your back, and they may betray you at the most inopportune time, which adds a nice interesting twist to a game that can be played cooperatively and or competitively. Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter is a dexterity game for 1 to 10 players, designed by Jonathan Gilmore, a couple other designers whose names I am not going to do my worst case attempt to butcher their names, and is also put out by Pretzel Games. Now, this is 100% a flicking dexterity style game where every player or team, or however you want to play it, can be played solo, cooperatively, team-based, however you want to play it, but everybody's going to control a survivor or a couple survivors, depending on how you're playing the game. And it's a flicking game where you're going to have your little guy on the board. You're going to be flicking little discs that are basically your guns you're shooting at the zombies who are trying to invade the board. The cool thing about this game is it uses kind of like a dice tower, but there's no dice in the game. What is the dice tower for? Well, as a horde of zombies invade, they're going to be dropped into the dice tower, and where they land on the board is where those zombies are going to roam. The game does have a whole bunch of scenarios and various different ways to play it, and it does do a lot of things to borrow concepts from the other Flick 'em Up Wild West game, and also adding in mechanics from the classic Dead of Winter game, which is a horror survival game with a hidden traitor. This game does a whole bunch of those good things, but it keeps it a nice family-friendly package with more cartoony-looking zombies. And your basic objective is to survive the scenario, whether it's a team-based scenario, a fully cooperative scenario, or this is even one of those games you can play completely solo. That's Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter. We talked about games that are for really good for great large groups, anywhere from 8 all the way up to, well, let's talk about 30 people if you're one heck of a party goer. But now let's talk about games that are great for solo. Now, some of these games are 100% solo, or games that were, you can pretty much tell these were designed predominantly to be solo games, but they added in rules to make them be playable by more than one player. But truly at their heart and truly at their soul, these are true one-player solo games. Now, the reason why I give that little caveat is because a lot of these games, any basic cooperative game you can play solo. Some of them don't feel like true solo games because they're going to force you to control multiple heroes or something like that. These games I'm about to talk about right now, really 100% fantastic horror-themed solo games. Dawn of the Zed's 3rd edition lists as a game for 1 to 5 players, but this is definitely a game that's best at 1 player. Designed by Herman Lutman, and this is a game that's published by Victory Point Games. This is a zombie-themed tower defense game. If you've ever seen The Walking Dead, read The Walking Dead comic books, or anything like that, Dawn of the Zeds is basically what that is. You have a city in the center of a board that is at the center of multiple different paths, and all these paths lead to the city. At the end of every one of these paths, zombies are going to be spawning. Now, they may be standard zombies, or they may be super zombies, or anything along those lines, but your only basic objective is to stop the onslaught of zombies as they slowly keep working towards your city. If you stop the zombies from invading your city and overrunning, you're going to win the game. But if you fail to do so, then life is going to be horrible. The zombie apocalypse is going to wipe out your city, and you're going to lose this tower defense game. The cool thing about this game is this game comes with multiple heroes, but you're only going to control a couple of heroes every time you play the game. And there's different things that are going to make the game play differently because there's multiple different scenarios. And one of the great things about this game, multiple different difficulty levels. Difficulty levels all the way from 1 to 5. And if you want to be really mean and really devious, or, you know, have that nice Halloween theme, one person can even control the zombies and do their darndest to bring about the end of humanity, because you have the zombie sympathizers who, well, they think zombies have all right, and they're going to enjoy and welcome in their new zombie overlords as they welcome in the end of times through Dawn of the Zeds. Final Girl is a truly 100% one-player cooperative game designed by Evan Derrick and published by Van Ryder Games. Now, Final Girl takes all those classic 80s tropes that we know and love from horror games or from horror movies and brings it into a horror game. In Final Girl, you are that lone survivor who is the last one. You are the one who's running from Michael Myers and Halloween. You're the one running from Freddy Krueger. Yes, you are even that last person on Camp Crystal Lake doing your best to run from Jason or just defeat the slasher and win the game. Because this is a game where you and you alone are trying to do your best to stop this evil monstrosity from hunting you down. The game does have some interesting mechanics and some great ways to play the game. And the interesting thing is how you're going to take the base game itself and you're going to marry it with individual different themes or different motives, for lack of better words. And those motives are themed after certain slasher films, and that's going to be the game that you're going to play. It does wonderful throwbacks to classic horror tropes, classic horror films, and the classic scene we've all seen before with that one lone survivor trying the darndest to run from the evil serial killer, the slasher, the monster, the evil from hell, and be the last person, the final girl. Don't Look Back is a game for 1 to 6 players by Matthew Burns and published by Black Site Studios. And this is a lot like the game of Final Girl, but whereas Final Girl is a spiritual successor to Hostage Negotiator using those kind of mechanics, this game is pretty much a miniature style game. In this game, you're going to build up a board using miniatures. You're going to build up your scenario and your scenery with houses, fences, cars, everything. If you ever played a miniature style game, you know what we're talking about here. And then you, playing solo, are going to control the group of survivors lost in the woods or out at Camp Crystal Lake or whatever it happens to be when there's an evil slasher, an evil monster, an evil monstrosity, a miniature style game again, but is hunting down all of our heroes who are just trying to survive the scenario. Whether that scenario happens to be to get in the truck and drive on out to escape, or maybe some other thing you're trying to do, this is 100% a miniature style game. It's great how it gives you the theme of a nice horror game and it brings it down to the tabletop in a miniature style game, which is very, very cool. This game can be played 100% solo, and to me it feels like it was designed as a solo game. Now, to be fair, the game does play for 1 to 6 players with multiple survivors, which is very, very cool, which allows you to bring this game to a group. But one of the best ways to play this game, just how thematic it is to play miniature style game with your painted miniatures, your painted scenery, turn down the lights, turn up the haunted music, and play through the game. That is going to feel just like a classic horror game through the tabletop. Darkest Night 2nd Edition is a game for 1 to 5 players by Jeremy Leonard and published by Victory Point Games. Now, this game is a card game that marries the concept of pandemic into a game where our heroes are a group of fantasy heroes. And this feels much more Lord of the Rings heroes versus super high fantasy, doing our darndest to work together to defeat an evil necromancer that's trying to do the Sauron thing and destroy the entire world, raising his evil armies and making life as difficult as possible. Now, this game does so many great things, and I can talk about this game for hours and hours on end because it's a game that I so greatly enjoy. The basic idea is the game has nearly 30 different heroes in it, and I think there's actually maybe more now I think about it. But out of those 30 fantasy heroes, you are going to pick 4 fantasy heroes. Now, the game is solo, like I said, but it does play from 1 to 5 players. But you're going to pick your small band of heroes, and you're basically working together with your small band of heroes to try to defeat the necromancer. Every one of these heroes plays so darn differently because every one of those heroes comes with their own individual deck of cards. Here's a secondary kicker. You'll never see all those cards every time you play the game. So every time you play the fighter, the warrior, using more generic type descriptions here, you have access to your hand of cards, but you may only see some of them. So you may see like more of your defensive cards versus your offensive cards. And how those cards come out are going to influence your decisions and how you play the game. Additionally, even though it plays like a pandemic style game where there's multiple different horrors and tragedies filling up the board is very small. There's a minuscule amount of locations. There's actually only a handful amount of locations versus a game like Pandemic, which has 30 plus locations. So everything about the game feels like a very tight, constrained thing because you can go to so minimal amount of locations. So the necromancer feels like its baddies are on your heels at all times. There's one safe spot on the board, and that's the cathedral. Everything else is being blighted and taken over by the necromancer. That is a wonderful game that plays with cards, plays with lots of variety, lots of replay. That is going to be the game of Darkest Night 2nd Edition. Tabletop gaming means more than just playing games on a tabletop. When it comes to dice and moving around cards and miniatures along those lines, tabletop gaming also means playing RPGs. So for the RPG group, let's go ahead and cover some great RPGs to play on this Halloween. First up is going to be the RPG of Dread. Dread plays, well, basically from to as many people as you get to belly around the table. And Dread is a RPG that is so unique and is published by a company called The Impossible Dream. Now, in the game of Dread, Dread is your very standard one-shot style RPG thematically, but when it comes to the rules, there's nothing standard to the game of Dread itself. The way the game of Dread is going to work is this is a one-shot style RPG, and when you have everybody come over for your RPG session, basically you're going to hand a questionnaire to all the players. The questionnaire is going to help them build up their characters because this is an RPG that doesn't have any character stats. Then all the players are going to get a Jenga tower, one single Jenga tower for all the players, because also this game doesn't use any dice at all. The mechanics of this game is your character is going to be generated based on how you answer the questionnaire, and all the actions you're going to perform on this game are going to be based on playing with the Jenga tower. Every time you need to do something that could be challenging for your character, it can require a pull, 2 pulls, or maybe even 3 pulls from the Jenga tower. If you succeed in your pulls with the Jenga tower, whatever you're trying to do will succeed. For example, let's say your questionnaire fills out and makes it turn into the fact that you have to be a doctor. As a doctor, if you have to put a splint on somebody, probably not going to require a pull because you've probably done it a couple thousand times. But let's say you got to dig a bullet out of somebody while there's a werewolf charging down the hill from off in the distance, you have very little time. That could be 3 pulls from the tower. Here's where the Jenga tower comes in so darn awesome for this game. If you pull from the Jenga tower and you knock over the Jenga tower, your hero is going to die. You will be the next to die, whether it's going to be a gruesome death or whatever it happens to be. It's up to the storyteller to decide and describe how you are going to end your part of this story as you are the next victim in this Dread RPG. This is a great game that plays as one-shots. Your average game of Dread is going to go from 2 to 3 hours. That's one of the fantastic things about it. That's the actual play was about 2 to 3 hours, but setting up for the game is just as quick. Quite literally, as a storyteller, you're going to come up with a story before your friends come over. You're going to make a whole bunch of questionnaires, one for each individual player. And the really interesting thing about these questionnaires are these aren't your normal questionnaires about what's your name and all that good things. Well, that may be one of the questionnaire things. The questionnaires are going to be more dark and more devious and more into the mind games and might influence how all the other players see each other at the table. There are going to be questions like, why hasn't anybody ever found that body that you hid? And why is that body there in the first place? Or what deep secret from your childhood are you hiding from everybody else around the table here? Various questions like that go together to form your story character. And those are the story characters your storyteller is going to work towards to create a wonderful, fantastic, extremely thematic, and very tense role-playing game. That's going to be the game of Dread. Wicked Ones is an RPG from Bandicam. Just like most RPGs, it's going to be played from 2 all the way up to as many players as you can bully around the table. But the idea of the game of Wicked Ones, and this is an RPG that takes a wonderful different spin from how everything we've done before. Because in Wicked Ones, you get to play the bad guys. Instead of being the heroes who are going to infiltrate the dungeon, kick open doors, and defeat the goblins, you're going to be the goblins who have built your lair trying to stop these horrible humans from kicking down your doors that you worked so hard to build up in these dungeons as you're trying to protect your tribe, your party, whatever it happens to be. Because like I said, you are the bad guys here. Now, the interesting thing about the game Wicked Ones is this can be more of a one-shot. It can also be a campaign-style game as the players, the monsters of the story, whether it happens to be mind flayers, mummies, goblins, trolls, whatever it happens to be, your ragtag group of misfits has got to hunt down your dungeon, build up your dungeon itself, and then stop the horrible, horrible heroes from going through and messing up all your wonderful plans. It's a very nice, easy gaming system. It uses a very nice, simple dice mechanic to make this a wonderful game that's so darn easy to teach. Matter of fact, if you have friends who have played any RPGs before, you can sit them up next to the table very easily and teach them how to play the game of Wicked Ones. It uses a very old RPG campaign system or rules-based system that has actually been around for quite a while. And that's the system of Forged in the Dark. So we've all seen Forged in the Dark. This is a modernization of it with a brand new theme that is very, very cool. That's the game of Wicked Ones. And of course, rounding this out, we're not going to have Halloween without mentioning the Call of Cthulhu RPG. Call of Cthulhu is an RPG that is definitely an RPG that does work great, much, much better in the one-shots, but it is a game that can be played through campaigns or various different things like that. But Call of Cthulhu is the game of investigators working against the mythos, trying to stop the mythos from invading our reality. It's basically like the board games we already talked about, but in an RPG format, because in these games, players have to deal with sanity. Players have to deal with the fact that they're extremely frail, when compared to monsters and monstrosities that can basically chew them up and spit them out very darn easily. And this is a game that has various different timelines that you can play through that can play very, very differently. You can play the traditional Call of Cthulhu back in the Roaring 20s, where you have Tommy guns, gangsters, and great old ones. Or you can play more of a pulp style where the players have a little bit better chance of surviving and they have maybe some gadgets and different things. Or you can even play Call of Cthulhu Modern, where you got the modern trappings of society, cell phones, computers, and all those other things, but then you get different stories you can also tell, all in the great game of Call of Cthulhu. This is an RPG system that is now in its 7th edition. It's been around for dozens of years, literally. It's originally designed by Sandy Peterson, and the game has gone through many editions, but the great thing about it is the game has not changed that much over the years. It's a wonderful RPG system, very thematic, and very, very perfect for playing on Halloween. Dice game. Dice are wonderful. Dice are wonderful bringers of chaos, and dice are wonderful ways to play your board games. And the first game in our dice category is going to be Kingsport Festival. Now, Kingsport Festival is a game that's designed by a couple guys whose names I'm not even going to try to butcher, and it's also published by a couple different companies. I think the copy of the game I have is by Star something or other, but it's definitely not with the company I believe who is still putting this game out. But the basic idea of Kingsport Festival is this is Kingsburg with a Cthulhu mythos theme, because all of us are going to be cultists and we're trying to curry the favor of the great old ones by using dice. In this game, we're going to roll dice and we're looking for specific symbols on our dice or sides of our dice, which allows us to do various different things while we're trying to work around a board and get different abilities by the dice sides that we happen to make roll on the dice we have. It's a very interesting game. It's a very interesting take on the classic game of Kingsburg with a very strong horror theme. Now, the game does play for 3 to 5 players, and it's a really great, fantastic dice-style game if you're looking for a dice game this Halloween season. Next up in the dice category is going to be Elder Sign. Now, we've already covered Elder Sign earlier in the games for a large group of players, so we'll just say it all over again. 1 to 8 players, cooperative, theme-based if you want to go through the various different theme paths, but it's also a fantastic dice-style game that really brings a lot of fun for all the players, and it definitely fits in the category of dice games for Halloween. We talked about dice games. Let's talk about card games now, because card games are great, and the wonderful thing about them is we get the enjoyment of playing the game. Sometimes that can even tell us a story, or games that just remove the little monster of chaos that dice can happen to be. And our very first game we're going to cover is Arkham Horror, the card game. Now, Arkham Horror, the card game, the base box itself, this is a cooperative game, but the base box will play 1 to 2 players. But if you get a second copy of the base game, you can play the game all the way up to 4 players. It's designed by Nate French, and the publisher is going to be Fantasy Flight Games. Now, this takes Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, and all those classic Arkham-style games and brings it down into a card game, but keeps the very strong feel of those games themselves. It's a very story-driven game where you're going to be going through a deck of cards. You're going to have your investigator. You're going to be building up by doing a card drafting mechanic to get cards in your hand, and that's going to allow you to play through all these stories. The game comes with multiple different expansion packs that all tell different stories, classic stories in the Arkham Horror universe, but the basic idea is it truly is a card game where you have your investigator, you're going to play cards for actions, and they're going to allow you to do different things while you're trying to work cooperatively with the other players at the table. And again, this is a game that can play solo. And I could have put in the solo list, but I thought it meant much, much better to talk about now in the category of card games, because this is a great card game in the Arkham universe, giving you that grand theme of H.P. Lovecraft and the mythos. Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game, is a game for 1 to 5 players, designed by Ben Shikowski, Daniel Mandel, and is published by Upper Deck Entertainment. I almost said Upper Deck Management. That would have been very funny to get that one wrong. But this is a game from Upper Deck, and this is the Aliens, or Alien 3, or the not highly regarded Alien 4 movies in a card game format. In these games, you're going to use the legendary system to play cooperatively with your friends as you try to defeat the classic Alien movies. Now, there's a couple expansions that actually take some spiritual theme from some of the various different books and some of the other stories in the Aliens universe, but the basic game itself tells you the first 4 stories of the first 4 movies, and you are going to live through these movies. And the theme and the intensity and the action comes through in this wonderful deck building game, where you are going to be having your hand of cards and you're going to play cooperative with the other players, and you're going to have a track of aliens and events that are going across this. It's kind of a rollout board, but the board is kind of superfluous. You don't really need it. You're trying to do various different tasks based on the scenario and how far you're into the movie, trying to defeat the alien, the aliens, or whichever movie you happen to be playing against. While you're trying to avoid the facehuggers, while you're trying to avoid all the other players around the table being defeated, or even yourself being defeated. Because if one of you becomes a facehugger, you get to become the alien the overpowered alien, meaning that the game is going to be coming to an end very, very quickly. But this is a wonderful game, and it's the absolute best version of any of the Alien games I've ever played. Yes, there's other Alien games, but this game did it first, in my opinion, and it did it best. And this is a wonderful way to play Alien or any of those movies with Captain Ripley as you work against the xenomorph that brought a whole bunch of pain, misery, and agony to our poor, intrepid crew aboard those ships in the emptiness of space. The Bloody Inn is a card game for 1 to 4 players designed by Nicholas Robert and published by Pearl Games. The Bloody Inn is kind of a wonderful idea of a game, and it's so darn unique. In the Bloody Inn, every one of you is an innkeeper who is trying to bring guests into your inn for very, very nefarious purposes. And then when you're done with those nefarious purposes, you must hide the bodies. This is a very interesting card game that does play for 1 to 4 players, and it's one of the more unique themes that I've actually seen in our market. Kind of one of the criticisms I have about our board gaming hobby is so many times how we keep repeating the same themes. Well, the Bloody Inn did a fantastic job of putting a very unique spin on more of a traditional card game style game. Because like I said, you are innkeepers and you're working quite deviously and darkly. Basically, this is almost like a very dark version of the movie Hostel. You just need to do your best to do your darkest while hiding the bodies in this wonderful card game for 1 to 4 players. Gloom is a competitive card game for 2 to 4 players by Keith Baker and designed, or I should say published by Atlas Games. Now, Gloom is, as it sounds, it's gloom and depression. Basically, in the game of Gloom, every player controls a family, and you're trying to have the most fateful, tragic things happen to your family while all the other players around the table are trying to race you to do the same, while trying to ruin your tragedies that you've caused for your families. Whichever family has the most tragic story is going to be the winner of the game and bring gloom to their family. Gloom does a couple of really cool things as a card game. One, the cards are very interesting because they're transparent. You're going to lay them on top of each other, which is going to allow the cards to change up as you play. Also, the theme of the game is actually really interesting. Very few games do you play where you're trying to make things as miserable as possible as it is for your team. That's your objective. To win the game, you win through misery. That's the card game of Gloom. Apocrypha, the Adventure card game, is a game for 1 to 6 players, designed by Mike Selinker and published by Lone Shark Games. Now, this game took the Pathfinder took the Pathfinder Adventure card game and added a much more modern theme to it while giving a theme of classic TV shows such as Supernatural, classic TV shows as Grimm, all those serialistic TV shows where the basic idea is you almost have a creature of the week kind of feature. In the game of Apocrypha, every single one of the players is going to play a saint. Saints have the blessing or the curse, however you want to see it, that they can see the evils of the world, and they're doing their darnest to hunt down those evils and eradicate them from the world. Now, the game plays out very episodic, but it's also a campaign-based game because your saint can level up in a way, gain extra abilities, and modify your deck because this is a deck construction game where you're building up your deck that's going to give you extra powers, extra abilities, and you're trying to keep your deck because it can only be a certain size. So you're trying to get rid of the weaker cards and bring in the more powerful cards as you go through the entire campaign. Now, it's pretty much nearly impossible to go through an entire campaign of this game because there's so many adventures. Dozens and dozens and dozens of adventures in this. And not only that, since it's very episodic, and basically like Supernatural and all those other games, some of the saints may die. And when you're dead, you're permanently removed, and you must then create another saint to continue the campaign. Not only that, the campaign, basically, you can go wherever you want. You can decide that, hey, we're going to go after the shapeshifters this week, or this game session. Next week, we're going to go after the evil robots, or next week's game session. After that, we're going to go after the undead. Maybe then after that, we're going to come back to the shapeshifters, or maybe something else. Because every one of the expansion boxes has a whole bunch of themes, and every one of those themes has multiple adventures. Gives it that very strong, episodic, monster creature feature of the week feel, while also giving you a campaign thanks to the fact that your saint can grow over the way the game is played. This is a card game that does use dice because you're going to play cards that are going to allow you to roll a certain amount of dice. The dice are going to be rolled, and those dice are going to be rolled to try to get results, to defeat the encounters, defeat the enemies, defeat the monsters, and defeat various different tragedies and challenges created by the different locations of the game. That is Apocrypha, the adventure card game. Sometimes on Halloween or sometimes at your gaming table, you just want to play a cooperative game. So now here's a section full of cooperative games to play with your friends this Halloween. And the top of the list is going to be Horrified from Prospero Hall and published by Ravensburger. Now, this is a game that is, let's just be blunt. This is basically, well, I should tell you the player count. This is a 1 to 5 player game, but this is basically takes the idea of pandemic and marries it with a horror theme, but changes up just enough of it to make it not feel like pandemic. Because like pandemic, you have different locations that you're going to where you're trying to remove difficulties and things like that. And what this game adds on to is the fact that you have these monsters, these classic monster tropes from Dracula, Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or if you even play the American Monsters version, which has different monsters and like Chupacabra and all those. Basically, every time you play the game, you're going to choose a group of these monsters. If you want an easier game, you're going to choose less monsters. If you want a harder game, you can choose all the way up to 3 monsters. Every one of these monsters has a certain way they can be defeated. You have to work on goals to defeat all of these different monsters, and depending on how many monsters you put in the game, that's how many monsters you have to defeat. As a group, you have to defeat all the monsters before the monsters do their evil dark deeds and make you lose the game. It's a time game because you have a deck of cards that is your time limit. Additionally, you must worry about the morale of the people in the town. Plus, you also must worry about the morale of your own heroes because our heroes can be defeated. They're not permanently defeated, but when something bad happens to them, a tracker is going to advance that's going to be closer to bringing about the end of the game. The very nice thing about this game is it does have a layer theme, so this game is also going to appear in a little bit list further on down, so we'll talk about it a little bit more then, but this is Horrified, the very much wonderful horror-themed cooperative game. Ghost Stories is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players by Anton Bauza, and it's published by Repos Production. There is also an expansion for this game. I can't remember if the expansion actually makes it a 5-player game or not, but I know there's an expansion that I actually highly recommend. If you find this game, play with the expansion. This is an extremely brutal game where the players are in an Asian theme where we're trying to work together to stop a horrible monstrosity from doing its evil thing. Just like, well, all the games on this list here. But this is a cooperative game that is extremely brutal and extremely challenging. It brings in some wonderful mechanics to make this an extremely challenging game. And this is one of those games that you're not going to win a lot. This is probably one of those games that you're going to have more towards a 15% win rate versus games like Pandemic where you're going to have a much higher win rate. But this game is a wonderful horror style game. The basic idea of this game is the players are trying to stop the Wu Fang. Something like that. It's like Wu Fang or Wu Ling. It's been a while since I played the game. But we're trying to stop him from summoning his ghosts, which are going to bring a whole bunch of problems for our villagers. So we must cooperatively work together to stop these ghosts from causing problems for us while we work to try to defeat Wu Fang or Wu Ling. I know it's one of those. People are going to laugh at me because I can't remember which one it is. But that is the game of Ghost Stories, a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players from Anton Bauza. One of his earlier designs, but definitely a great design from Anton Bauza. Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu is a cooperative game for 2 to 4 players by Matt Leacock and is put out by Z-Man Games. Take Pandemic, take Cthulhu Mythos, mix them together, and you get this game of Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. This basically takes the basic idea of Pandemic and adds in a couple extra mechanics to give you the theme of Cthulhu. You get a couple extra monstrosities, you get a couple extra challenges, you get gates that are coming in. Basically, imagine if you took Pandemic and you just shook in some Cthulhu. That's basically what you got here. I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just trying to make it as quick and painless as possible to describe this game. You're going across trying to close all the gates to make your team win before the bad game thing happens. Look, you've all played Pandemic before. This is Pandemic plus Cthulhu. If you like Pandemic, if you like Cthulhu, get this game. You're going to be happy. Don't Look Back is a game we've already talked about for 1 to 6 players from Matthew Burns and put out by Blackside Studios. I've already talked about this game. This is a miniatures game taking the classic themes of the Friday the 13th or any one of those slasher films you've already seen or enjoyed in the great heyday of the classic 80s horror films. If you played any of them and you want to see those as a miniature game, this is the game for you. It's a cooperative game. It plays all the way from 1 to 6 players. If you like miniatures, if you're a painter, you like making scenery, if you enjoy all those things, you're going to enjoy this game. Bring it out, bring it to the table. Everybody's going to be happy, and everybody's going to have a heck of a lot of fun. Machina Arcana. It's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, designed by Jiraj Bilik. I hopefully did not butcher his name too badly, and it's brought out by Andrima Games. I really hope I didn't butcher that too badly either. If I did, I really do apologize. But this is one of the better cooperative Cthulhu-style Mythos games that I've played in the past couple years. Basically because what they have done is they've taken style of a dungeon crawler, mix it with a Cthulhu style of the game, but brought it out as like a very strong story driven game. I'm going to cover the story-driven mechanics because that's what's so cool about this 1 to 4 player cooperative game. When you play this game, it's a dungeon crawler. I know I'm oversimplifying it. Stick with me here. I'm trying to make this whole video quickly. Take a dungeon crawler, take bad guys, take heroes who are going to level up, get equipment, get better gear versus enemies who are going to level up. You played that before. Now add in scenarios and stories that are going to play differently every time you play the game. You're going to have a stack of cards. Every time you play the scenarios, these stack of cards are in a specific order every time you play the game. You're going to flip over the top card. It has a storyline. It's going to tell you what you need to do to go to the next card. Some of those things can be challenging. Some of those things can be a little bit less challenging, but they're never going to be easy to do. Once you accomplish that thing, you're immediately going to pause, flip over to the next card, read more into the story, and it's going to tell you what you need to do to go to the next card. It's a wonderful mechanic that seems so simplistic on the surface, but it's so darn thematic because you get these really strong story elements that evolve as you play the game. So you feel like you're kind of living the storyline versus a lot of dungeon crawlers would say, blah, 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 go forth. This one is story, story, do some things, story, story, do some things, story, story. Oh my God, we're doomed. We're about to fight the big bad guy. We had no idea what was coming because it was the final card in the stack. So the game has a wonderful theme, a wonderful story along those aspects. Minor caveat about this, yes, it is a little bit less fun the more you play the game because you know how the stories are going to evolve unless you get some of the expansions which modify that a little bit. But if you get the base game, understand that the stories, you're going to know how they evolve. So after you play them a couple times, you can kind of go, guys, if we don't do this one thing, there's 2 cards coming up here pretty soon that are going to make our lives miserable. So that a little bit becomes a little bit of spoiler aspect to it, but beyond that, it's a great, wonderful story thematic game for 1 to 4 players. Zombie 15 is a cooperative game for 2 to 4 players by Guillaume Lemaitre, Nicholas. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to butcher these names from here to infinity. Let's just say the game is put up by Yellow, and I'm going to try to save face here and not butcher any more names horribly, terribly here. Zombie 15 is a cooperative game that is played in 15 minutes. I know you're like, no. Yes, it's played in 15 minutes because this is a game that you're going to play with a timer. And the basic idea is you need to complete whatever this dungeon crawler style scenario is, whatever happens to be its goal, before the timer runs out. As you're playing the game, every single minute, approximately, a growl is going to occur. Every time a growl occurs, something bad is going to happen with the zombies, and they're going to become more zombies. The life's going to be more difficult as our heroes are working across the board trying to do this thing. So this game is one of the very few games that gives you the horror, gives you the theme, and gives you the stress because that time pressure is constantly weighing against you because you know you don't have a lot of time. And you know the zombie growls when it's your turn, the zombies are going to come after you. So you're trying to do your darnest, do everything you can as quick as you can to go, wait, it's your turn, go do that thing. So you have that nice, wonderful panic and that wonderful theme, and it's actually fully a campaign game. You're going to play each campaign or each scenario, and if you succeed, you get to go to the next scenario. If you fail, well, it's curtains for the Zombie 15 crew. Because what I didn't mention earlier is that the zombie plague affects every single adult on the planet. Our plucky little heroes are a group of teenagers just trying to do their darndest to escape from the zombie apocalypse. That's Zombie 15. Planet Apocalypse is a cooperative tower defense game for 1 to 5 players from Sandy Peterson and put out by Peterson Games. Did you ever play Classic Doom? Did you ever play Classic Quake? Well, imagine if the Space Marine, whose only job was to shut down those portals to hell, failed, and all those portals managed to come to Earth, and now all the survivors must play a tower defense game where we must stop the hordes of hell from invading our cities, our towns, and our homes in an effort to push back the evils and hopefully save our planet from a horrible, horrible apocalyptic doom. This is a game where players are going to control a hero who gets to level up, gain special abilities through experience system. It's not truly experience. I'm trying to be as generic and quick as possible here. But basically, players are going to level up their heroes, gaining extra special powers, versus a tower defense game where the hordes of hell are literally trying to encroach upon you every single turn. They're going to advance the smaller, weaker legions of hell, while the more powerful legions are also going to come upon you, while some greater, horrible monstrosity is also working its way towards getting to our heroes. If all the monstrosities manage to get to our heroes and to their base, our heroes are going to lose. If our heroes cooperatively manage to get together, work together, enter hell time, and defeat the horrible monstrosities of hell, our heroes are going to win the game. Now, the game comes with multiple maps, multiple different heroes, multiple adversaries, and all those things create a wonderful amount of replay. A game that has some phenomenal replay potential. It's also a game that's extremely challenging. Oh my gosh, there are some map combinations I don't see how you can win. Supposedly they're winnable, but I just don't see how it's going to happen. But that's what I like about the game. If I want a game that's going to be a little bit easier, I know what maps and bad guys I'm going to pick. If I want a map that's just going to kick us all in the teeth, I'm going to say, yeah, see this map right here? Yeah, we're not going to win, but hey, let's go have some fun anyways. That's Planet Apocalypse. Darkest Night is a play game for 1 to 5 players by Jeremy Leonard and by Victory Point Games. We've already talked about this game earlier, but I just need to put in the cooperative group because this is a fantastic co-op game that does play all the way from 1 to 5 players. Now, the reason why I put it in the solo game, because this is one of those games where each hero has a very finite amount of movements they can make. So that's why it does feel like it plays better as a solo game, because as a solo player, when you're controlling all the heroes, it feels like you have more moves. But when you're playing this with many players, up to the 5-player count that does allow, the amount of moves you have are so minuscule and comparative, it makes it feel like every single move you make matters, which causes a lot of pressure and a lot of tension as you're trying to play this horror necromancer pandemic style game with your hero, just trying to stop the necromancer from raising his hordes of hell and bringing about doom with the undead. It's a wonderful game, a great game, solo or cooperatively. That's going to be Darkest Night. I'm talking about the 2nd edition here specifically. Carnival Zombie 2nd Edition is a game for 1 to 6 players by Mateo Santos, published by Albe Pavo. And what can I say about this game, because it's such a unique cooperative game? This is a tower defense game, but it's also a game of time pressure. It's a game of horrible hordes of zombies. It's an interesting game that you can play that is really a really cool take on the zombie apocalypse. Basically, our heroes happen to be in Carnival in Italy when the zombie apocalypse has occurred, and the great Leviathan has woken up, bringing back all the hordes of undead, and our heroes must escape from the city before the city sinks and the horrible Leviathan brings, well, the end times through the zombie apocalypse. Here's the cool thing about this game, among many different cool things. There's multiple different ways to play the game to its ending, because there's multiple different endings. Whether your ending is just to escape from the bridge and escape Milan and hopefully go to greener pastures, maybe your hope is to get rescued by a blimp and possibly sail off, or maybe get in a boat and just sail away. Or maybe you're going to be the ultimate heroes, find the holy bomb, drop it on the great Leviathan, and save all of our, well, the entire planet itself, but that's the hardest ending. Because the game is multiple different difficulty levels, but it also is a tower defense game. Because during the day, players are going to move around the city of Milan trying to get supplies. During the night, we're going to play a tower defense game where we're going to have the hordes of zombies advancing our heroes as they're barricaded in their center, in their sanctuary in the center of the board. Every single turn, players are going to take actions to defeat zombies. Any of the zombies that are defeated have to be dropped on a corpse pile because they're cubes. Any cubes that land on the corpse pile, which is a little pile just like this, life is wonderful. Any zombies that fall to the corpse pile, including the ones you dropped or ones you just happen to knock off, they're going to come back to life. They're going to start attacking our heroes again. Now you see the challenges. Adding on to these challenges is the fact that there are super zombies out there. People decide that, you know what, this zombie life is quite for me. Give it to me because I want the extra special powers because I'm going to be a zombie lieutenant. So they make life extra fun, extra special in this game of Carnival Zombie. Sometimes on Halloween we want to be cooperative, and sometimes on Halloween we want to be competitive or play team games, or, you know, just do the Halloween thing and try to stab our other players in the back. So now we have a group of games that are great as competitive or team-based games, and on the top of the list we're going to have Fury of Dracula. Fury of Dracula is a game for 2 to 5 players. It does have multiple different publishers over the years. The original game was published by Games Workshop, then it went to Fantasy Flight Games, and I think it's now back in limbo. I think Games Workshop actually has the game back again. But this is a game for 2 to 5 players. It's a team-based game. One person controls Dracula. The other player or players are going to control the heroes from a classic Dracula novel. The basic idea is this is a hidden movement game where Dracula can move hidden, and they're trying to bring their darkness across the entire countryside, while our heroes are trying to hunt down Dracula, take a stake, and drive it right through his heart. The cool thing about this game is, since it's a hidden movement game, this is much more of a cat-and-mouse style hidden movement game, because Dracula doesn't always have to hide. Dracula does have the ability to pop out through their secret movements and actually attack the other players. So this game adds an extra level of tension that you don't see in a lot of hidden movement games. Because a lot of hidden movement games, it's up to the hidden mover, that person, to stay away from the heroes as much as possible. Well, in Fury of Dracula, you can do that. Or you can come out there and attack the heroes, or you can lay traps for them, or you can do anything you like to do along those lines, because this is the game of Fury of Dracula. Next up is a game of Cthulhu Wars. We've already covered this. Cthulhu Wars, 3 to 8 players, designed by Sandy Peterson of Peterson Games. This is a Dudes on the Map. This is a war game where we're all going to control the hordes of the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. Every person controls a great old one with their special units, their great old one, their unit cards, their spell books, and we're going to try ruin and destruction to the planet. It's a competitive game. Whoever brings the most ruin and destruction gets the most points, wins the game. That's Cthulhu Wars. Claustrophobia, or Claustrophobia 1643, is a game that is purely for 2 players, designed by Croc, and is also currently published by Monolith Games. This is a game that is purely a head-to-head miniature style game. One player is going to control the demons of hell, and the other players are going to control the, well, I don't want to say the priests, because you're basically people who are forced to go into the catacombs, hunt down the demons, and defeat them. This game has a very interesting gameplay mechanics and an interesting way to play the game, but it's definitely a head-to-head game where players are going to be doing their best to use their abilities to go against the bad guys. But as things go on, their heroes are going to get weakened by basically how they're going to apply the negatives to every one of their heroes. Players, as the heroes, need to complete a scenario. The bad guys, as the hordes of hell, just need to stop the scenario from being completed to win the game. It's a wonderful game, lots of replay, lots of scenarios, different way you're going to play the game. It's a miniature style game on a board with a board that's going to play out differently every time you play the game. That's the game of Claustrophobia 1643, which is the most current edition of the game. Betrayal at House on the Hill is a game for 3 to 6 players by Bruce Glasgow, a couple other people, and is currently published by Avalon Hill. This is basically Scooby-Doo with a little bit more darker theme as a board game. This game plays out over 2 phases. Phase 1, all the players are in their typical horror trope. We're all stuck in a mansion, we're all exploring this mansion, or the courtyard, or whatever it happens to be, the attic, the basement, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Suddenly, the haunt is going to begin. Once the haunt begins, based on the events that occurred, the certain cards and the certain locations are on the table, one player is going to become most likely the bad guy, or various different things can happen. There's 100 different possible endings from this game. Some of the endings are really good. Some of the endings are, yeah, they're not that good. But most of the endings are at least pretty darn average or above good, whatever it happens to be. But once we move in the second half of the game, whoever the traitor happens to be, if there happens to be a traitor, their only goal is to complete their goal, while the rest of the remaining heroes, their only goal is to stop the evil traitor from doing whatever they happen to be. The cool thing is that the traitor gets their own book telling them what to do, and the heroes get their own book telling them what they need to do. And neither side knows what the other side is going to be doing. The cool thing is, since there's 100 scenarios, it's really hard to memorize all of them. And again, like I said, they're not all balanced great, but they always create a wonderful, let's call it a Scooby-Doo style feeling, because this game does have that feel with a, zoinks, it's the zombie in the closet. Well, let's not go that far, but it's still a fun game for 3 to 6 players. Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, is a game for 2 to 6 players by Jason Hill and published by Flying Frog Productions. This is an interesting take on the zombie theme, and this is a team-based game. One player or players, depending on how many players you're playing, are going to control the zombies, and the other player or players are going to control the survivors. It's a scenario-based game with a modular board where every single player is going to pick a survivor from a group of survivors. All the survivors have different abilities, different hit points, and different skills, and we're going to play through a scenario. Whether that scenario happens to be we need to find gas for the truck, put fuel in the truck, and escape, or we need to do various different things, or go inside the, let's call it the castle, Dr. Moreau, whatever we want to call it. We basically have an objective. Zombies win if they complete their objective. The heroes win if they complete their objective. It's a wonderful zombie game, very super lighthearted, very much a dice throwing game, but it's very cool, very fun, and it creates some wonderful stand-up moments where one side's throwing the dice because we know it's going to be a Hail Mary play in an effort to survive the final zombie apocalypse. Australia is a train game for 1 to 4 players, designed by Martin Wallace and put out by Showmill Games. This is actually technically a 1 to 5 player game, and it's actually a teams game. It's also a cooperative game. It's also a solo game. It's very interesting. It's your typical Martin Wallace game. Martin Wallace has a very interesting take on things when he ever designs his semi-competitive style games. But what is this game? This is a train game in Australia with a very strong Cthulhu mythos, because the players are trying to build their train networks while the horrible hordes of the Cthulhu mythos are doing their darnest to ruin all your train railways. You are going to use your train railways to bring out your armies and your units to defeat the Cthulhu mythos, while the Cthulhu mythos is doing their best to work against you and prevent that from happening. Here's the cool thing about the game. It's competitive because all the players playing the train rail barons games are competing to have the highest score in the game. but the game is playing against you by controlling Cthulhu Mythos. If you don't defeat enough of the Cthulhu Mythos cooperatively, the game wins. So you have this interesting game where you're trying to defeat the Mythos a little bit better than everybody else at the table, but not so much that you're leaving yourself thin and that you're not getting the victory points. So it creates this interesting mechanic. Plus, there's also a 5th player version of the game where one person actually takes on the role of the Cthulhu Mythos. So it creates this really cool, interesting, dynamic train game that if you sit there and listen to somebody describe it, you go, there's no way that can be fun. But somehow it just is. It's a wonderful train game from one of the great train game designers with a wonderful Cthulhu theme. That's Australia. Next up is Mall of Horror or City of Horror, whatever you prefer. They're basically pretty much the same game for 3 to 6 players, designed by Nicholas Normandin, and this is put out by Asmodee. This is a very interesting game. This is an interesting game of basically you are trying not to be voted off the island here. That's the best way to describe the game. Because this is a survival game where you are just trying to be the last person surviving in a city of horror or the Mall of Horrors. The way this game is going to be played off is players are going to be basically voting people off the island. If you vote off the island, you're dead. You lose. There's no way you can win the game. It's a very interesting game that pretty much, yes, is a take-that style game if you really want to think about it. But the way the game is designed, the way a game is played is really darn interesting. It creates a whole bunch of social dynamics, lots of talking back and forth between the players as you're trying to argue why you should definitely not be voted off the island in the hopes that you're all going to survive the city or the Mall of Horror. Last Friday is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players by Antonio Ferreira, and it's put out by Pendragon Game Studio. Last Friday is a game that, kind of a theme game that we already talked about a couple times, where it's a typical slasher film, where you are trying to live through your, okay, it's Friday the 13th. You're trying to play Friday the 13th. This is Friday the 13th, the board game. Heck, it is called Last Friday. You know why? Friday the 13th. But basically, you're going to be going through not Camp Crystal Lake, as you are not the teenagers trying to survive by not Jason. It's about as plain as they can be. It's a wonderful game, though. It's a fun game. It really does capture the theme of what Friday the 13th and a classic horror slasher film is, of all the kids going to the campground to hopefully survive that one weekend of camping. And then a slasher decides to show up and, well, they want to kill everybody. It's a typical horror theme. Great for Halloween. Rise of the Necromancers is a game for 2 to 5 players by 2 publishers or designers whose names I'll probably butcher, but let's go for it. How about Thorbjørn Christensen and Christopher Kist? And a publisher is going to be Mythic Games. Now, this is another one of those games where it's good to be bad because you get to play the Necromancer. This is an area controller area majority dice-based game where you're using dice and variable different powers to go ahead and get the vast majority of the area control. This is a fun game where it's actually cool to be the bad guys, and it's a wonderful game that does this very, very well. The theme is very interesting, and you don't get to see too many of these style of game mechanically married with this kind of mechanic. It plays great for its player count, and it does give you a nice way to feel the theme. That is Rise of the Necromancers. Tower of Madness is a game for 3 to 5 players by Kurt Covert from Smirk and Dagger Games. Now, dirty little secret here. I enjoy Smirk and Dagger Games. I appreciate what they are trying to do when they design their games. Yes, they like to design take-that games, but for some reason, there's just a little bit of fun that they put in all their games, and it always kind of makes me enjoy these games. I understand we're being backhanded and deceitful, but it's fun anyways. And in this game, we get to lose our marbles. Because in this game, you have this nice, really cool tower where you're going to be pulling out little tentacles that are basically out of the tower. The way these tentacles are in the tower, they put little cross beams all across the tower going up and down, and there's marbles in it. As you pull out, the marbles are falling out in this game. And that's why I like to jokingly say, you're going to lose your marbles. It's kind of like, in the theme of the mythos. You're going crazy. But the idea of the game is players are going to be rolling dice to make investigation rolls. If they fail these investigation rolls, they need to make a pull from the tower. And the way you're going to be doing this is you're going to be hoping you're going to pull out a tentacle that doesn't cause marbles to fall out. If they fall out, then, yep, bad things are going to happen. It's a fun, quick, witty little game. It's very enjoyable, and it's great at all its player counts. That is going to be Tower of Madness, or they should have just called it Tower of Don't Lose Your Marbles. Nah, that would have been a lame name. Tower of Madness was a better name. Unfathomable is a game for 3 to 6 players, designed by Tony Fanchi and published by Fantasy Flight Games. Let's just get down to the brass tacks. Unfathomable is Battlestar Galactica, completely rethemed with the Cthulhu mythos. Instead of the Cylons and the horrible toasters, we have cultists and, not Shoggoths, but the other merman-looking guys who, come from the ocean depths. The basic idea is this is a game where we're going to have a hidden traitor. They're basically working on trying to get the cult-type things going, while the other players or the survivors are trying to make sure the cult-style things don't happen, while we're all trapped on a ship while the, little mermen are coming up. I know they're not called mermen, but I'm trying to make this nice and quick. If you play Battlestar Galactica and you're very sad you're never able to hunt down this game that has been long out of print, a really, really good game, and you want a good Halloween theme, here you go. It's Unfathomable. It's literally Battlestar Galactica, completely rethemed with a Cthulhu mythos theme. Check it out. When we're talking about hidden traitor games, you got to mention the granddaddy. Well, probably not the granddaddy, but it's old enough now to at least be the long-lost cousin's, uncle's, nephew's, twin's, brother's roommate. That's going to be the game of Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game for 2 to 5 players by Jonathan Gilmour, published by Plaid Hat Games. This is basically another zombie winter survival game, but it's not about the zombies. This is one of those few games that's definitely not about the zombies. This is all really probably one of the better games that does manage to take the theme of The Walking Dead. And if you ever watched The Walking Dead or read the comic books, Walking Dead was never really about the zombies. It's about the survivors and how dark the survivors can be. Well, that's what this game truly is. Because this is a hidden traitor game. Possibly. Not every single game we have a hidden traitor. But one of the people in this game is possibly a hidden traitor, and they're working towards their own goals and agendas. If they bring about their own goal and agenda, they're going to win the game. If the survivors manage to bring about their own goals and agendas, they're going to win. But both sides need to worry about the hordes of zombies that are trying to bring up their own agenda, which is controlled by the board game itself. So it's basically 3 different teams. 2 teams are controlled by the players. 1 team is not controlled by the players. But again, it's got a hidden traitor, so nobody knows why the other players are doing actions around the table. And the game forces everybody to do suboptimal actions. So every turn you're sitting there going, okay, did they play that gas can because they had to or because they're the traitor? So it's this interesting game of survival as the players are trying to survive in a zombie apocalypse, go out and explore various different ruins, fight the cold of the dead of winter, and worry about frostbite and dying to the zombie hordes. That is the game of Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. Betrayal House on the Hill, we've already covered. It's a game for 3 to 6 players, put out by Avalon Hill. It is a true hidden traitor game. But unlike other hidden traitor games where most of the time you know you're a hidden traitor, in Betrayal House on the Hill, you don't know you're the traitor until you become the traitor. So it's this interesting game where everybody's trying to work to not become super powerful, because if you become super powerful and you let somebody become super powerful, guess what? If they become the traitor, everybody else's life is very, very difficult. So the game is this nice balancing act of everybody trying to go get enough equipment to survive before the hunt begins, and then somebody's picked as a traitor. So it's definitely fits into the category of the hidden traitor game. It comes with a pretty darn good player count of all the way through 3 to 6 players. That's tons and tons of replay variety. That's Betrayal House on the Hill. Studying Emerald, this game for 2 to 5 players from Martin Wallace back in the days of Tree Frog Productions. I think he's pretty much moved away from that branding at this point. So you can't even get this game really through the marketplace anymore, which is such a shame. But this is a hidden traitor game with teams where players don't know who is on which team. Because you have 2 teams in this game. You have the Separatists and then you have the Cultists. I can't remember if they're called Cultists or not. Now I got to double check. But the basic idea is you're trying to figure out who is on your team around the table secretly while working towards your own team's agendas, which is where the Separatists trying to stop the evil great old ones, or you're the Cultists trying to bring about the works and the horribleness of the great old ones themselves. So you have this wonderful game that's back and forth, lots of playing, where players don't know who is on which team, but you know at least you're on your team, so your goal is to find out who else is there to help you while working towards your team's objectives while stopping the other team from completing theirs. That's the game of a study in Emerald. Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space, a 2 to 8 player game by a whole bunch of names I'll probably butcher, and it's published by Cranio Creations. We've already covered this one. It's a hidden movement game where you're going to be using dry erase markers on the board. The heroes are trying to escape. The aliens are trying to infect them. Definitely fits in the category of the hidden traitor game. Definitely a very team-based game and a fun game that works with many different player counts. Multiple variety through the different maps and different ways the game plays. Check it out. Room 25, or in this case, Room 25 Ultimate, is a game for 1 to 8 players by Francois Roos, and it's published by Madigo. Did you ever see the movie The Cube, or the sequel, which was, it was pretty decent too? The basic idea is everybody is a prisoner in this gigantic cube, which is broken down into multiple different rooms, which are connected in different ways. All these different rooms were basically death traps in various different forms, and your basic objective was just to escape the giant cube. Here's the trick. One or maybe two people are actually hidden traitors who are working for the people who built the cube, trying to make sure that everybody else dies while they survive. So the way this game works is you're trying to escape from the giant cube, which is made up of a whole bunch of smaller cubes. Think of a Rubik's Cube. Just think of a Rubik's Cube. Every single square in a Rubik's Cube is an individual room. So you're trying to escape by finding the escape route in this giant Rubik's Cube, which is manipulated and being moved at all times, because that's one of the powers that players have, is they can manipulate how the rooms are all positioned. Whoa. So while you're trying to escape, you're trying to figure out who the hidden traitors are. Well, the hidden traitors are trying to ensure that the players are accidentally dying due to mechanics and things that are occurring. And they're trying to keep their roles as secret as long as possible, because the longer they keep that secret, the more they can make mishaps happen for the survivors. At the end of the game, if the hidden traitors manage to do enough carnage and destruction, they're going to win the game. If the survivors manage to get enough of them that escape, they're going to win the game. It's a very interesting game with a good player count and a very great way to have the classic movie, The Cube, brought into a board game. That is Room 25 Ultimate, the best version of the game. I highly suggest. Dungeon crawlers. Dungeon crawlers are really cool because the fun thing about dungeon crawlers is there's pretty much two different ways of playing. Well, technically three. The cool thing about dungeon crawlers is that you can work as a group towards a goal versus another player, making them team-based games, or you work as a group versus a board, making it a cooperative game, or you can be you as a group versus an app, which is controlling the board. The nice thing about dungeon crawlers is there's variety on how the board is going to be laid out every time, different player powers and different abilities, and usually they're very thematic games. But the cool thing about them is that you get some really nice thematic horror themed games, and we can start with those by starting to talk first about the game of Nemesis. Nemesis is a game for 1 to 5 players by Adam Kopinski, and it's published by Awaken Realms. This is Aliens, the dungeon crawler. Remember I said Legendary, the deck building game, or I'm sorry, Legendary Encounters, the alien game was Aliens the movie? Well, this is Aliens the movie, the miniatures game, if somebody couldn't get the copyrights, because that's basically what it is. You're going to be on board the Nostromo, not the Nostromo, fighting aliens that are not aliens with your heroes that are space marines that aren't space marines. I'm being tongue-in-cheek here, I truly admit it. But you're basically playing the Aliens games. If you want to play Aliens, the movies, as a miniatures game, as a dungeon crawler, this is the game for you. Mansions of Madness is a game for 1 to 5 players by Nikki Valens and published by Fantasy Flight Games. Now that's the second edition. I personally like the first edition better because I don't really like playing app-based games that much. If I'm going to use a computer, I'm going to play a computer game. That's just me. So I'm really more talking about the first edition, but there's really nothing wrong with the second edition here. The basic idea of Mansions of Madness is every single player is going to take the role of investigator. Your objective is to survive through the scenario, find out exactly what is going on, and get to the end game by going through a story-based, dungeon crawling, scenario-based game. You're going to have various encounters with different classic monsters from the H.P. Lovecraft. There's going to be thematic events that are going to happen, lots of themes with cards and dice play and all these different things. But it's a wonderful team-based competitive game where in the first edition, one player took complete control of the enemies, took control of the board itself, and they're trying to tell the story, while the other players were cooperatively working together in this dungeon crawler style game to investigate this mansion, figure out what's going on to try to get to the bottom of things. The second edition is the exact same idea, except instead of one player controlling the game is controlled by an app, but pretty much the same thing. The players are going to play together cooperatively, exploring a mansion, a little town, various different things, depending on the scenario you're playing, trying to get to the bottom of an investigation and survive and get through Mansions of Madness. Cthulhu Death May Die is a game for 1 to 5 players by Rob Davio and published by Cool Mini or Not. This is a very thematic dungeon crawling game where the players are going to be playing investigators who are trying to hunt down the horrors of the mythos, except unlike Mansions of Madness where you felt like the whole game was against you, this is much more of a pulpy feel where the players have a better chance of surviving. They're going to be going against the mythos creatures with their guns ablazing, and they're not going to die instantly like would happen in a typical H.P. Lovecraft novel. It's a little bit more pulpy feel to it, which is a slight difference between this and Mansions of Madness. But it's basically a scenario-style game. You're going to play against one of the various different great old ones and their minions trying to get to the bottom of things and trying to solve basically a mystery. It's not as mystery driven as Mansions of Madness, but that's basically the style of gameplay. Your guys going through a dungeon, checking dice, trying to solve mysteries, and survive the hordes of H.P. Lovecraft. That's Cthulhu Death May Die. Zombicide in its various different incarnations is a cooperative game for 1 to 6 players by Raphael Gouton, Jean-Baptiste. It's got a couple other people designing the game, and it's published by Cool Mini or Not. And there are so many different Zombicides. There's Zombicide Black Pig, Zombicide, oh my gosh, there's even a Zombicide based off the classic not Walking Dead, was it The Walking Dead or whatever it is? Maybe it's The Walking Dead. It's the John Romero films. But the basic idea of the Zombicide games are these are fully cooperative dice checking games and very much more on the superheroic, not quite superheroic, but more on that side of things. Players are going to go in guns a-blazing with unlimited amounts of ammo, blasting through hordes and hordes of zombies, while the zombie hordes are constantly growing while we're just trying to get through a scenario, complete an objective, and win the game. It's a fully cooperative game, fully team-based from 1 to 6 players, and you have different heroes that are going to have different powers, different abilities. You have decks of cards where we're going to find loot, equipping Uzis, katanas, baseball bats, spiked baseball bats, ice skates that have super razors on them, ninja stars. If you think of any super Hollywood adrenaline pumping dice checking game, that's all the Zombicides. Fun games for what they are. Check them out if you want to have a nice dice checking game of you versus all the hordes of zombies. Shadows of Brimstone and City of Ancients and the other expansion, when you combine them together, makes a game for 1 to 6 players, but the basic game itself is just a game for 1 to 4 players if you only have one of the standalone boxes. It's designed by Jason Hill, and his brother, I believe, is also one of the designers, although I don't think he has credits on Board Game Geek. I can't remember correctly. Double check me on that one. Anyways, it's published by Flying Frog Games. Flying Frog Productions. Sorry, I just combined 2 publishers there in one word. How about Flying Frog Productions? This is your basic dungeon crawler, spiritual successor to the classic game from Games Workshop of Warhammer Quest, married with a weird Wild West horror theme where the players are going through the Wild West, where the Cthulhu mythos are invading the Wild West. You are going to level up your heroes all the way from level 1 to 8. You have various different classes such as your outlaw, your gunslinger, your preacher, all these different classes have different abilities, different skill trees. You're going to be gaining loot while you're going through all these different adventures. There's no real true campaign system. This is more of a game about taking a hero, leveling it up in a very similar style to a Diablo style game where it's more about you leveling up your hero, getting really cool gear, kicking down doors, and bashing the heads of the bad guys. The game does have its Wild West theme. It has its futuristic themes. It has its Japanese theme. There's even a couple more Kickstarters that are a couple years late now, but one of them was a Conquistadors theme, and I believe there was a Roman theme? I can't remember now. It's been so long since that Kickstarter was funded. But the basic idea is this is just a game that brings a lot of fun dungeon crawling and exploration. If you're looking for a good dungeon crawler that's all about exploration and more about leveling up your heroes, and you really don't care about this weird storyline. Who cares about the storyline? I just want to kick down the door, grab my loot, and level up. Well, that's going to be Shadows of Brimstone. And speaking of Warhammer Quest, we have Warhammer Quest Cursed City, a game for 1 to 4 players, published by Games Workshop. This is a cooperative dungeon crawler, and this is you in the city of Ulfenkarn. Ulfenkarn. Yeah, I think it's Ulfenkarn. Somebody will correct me on notes down below. But you versus the city. It's a city that's been overrun by vampires. This is a quest-based system where you're going to go through multiple different quests where you're trying to control the fear of the populace and try to bring hope to the populace, because there's 2 different tracks you need to control while you're doing various different missions. Some of the missions are preset, some of the missions are random, but they're going to allow you to level up and hunt down the agents of the evil vampire lord himself. After you manage to kill all of the vampire lord's specific minion agents, there's a couple different named ones you must defeat. Once you defeat them, you're going to go after the vampire lord himself. If you manage to defeat the vampire lord, everything's wonderful until you bring out the expansion where he gets to come back. Sorry, spoiler alert, but it was pretty obvious. It says it right on the box. If you look at the box, it says he's back. It's not a spoiler. Don't look at me like that, because that's not a spoiler. Okay, kind of. Anyways, this is a dungeon crawler. It's a very strong fantasy-based dungeon crawler where we have a strong Games Workshop's version of fantasy, where you get things like gunpowder and a little bit of electronics, not really electronics, but more steam forged from the dwarves and stuff like that. But you get that kind of more steam-powered fantasy versus the hordes of the undead. That's Warhammer Quest Cursed City, you the heroes versus the hordes of vampires. Hey, at least it's not zombies. Although there's a couple of zombies and a couple of skeletons. You just can't get away from zombies on Halloween, can you? Our next category is going to be thematic gaming. Now, the nice thing about the thematic gaming category is I've already covered all these games because they already fit in other categories very, very nicely. But if you want games that are purely about theme, we used to call this many years, this used to be called the Ameritrash gaming. Now we call them thematic games because these are games that are all about the story, all about the theme, and these are all about the theme of Halloween itself and the horrors of the world out there. You have Arkham Horror, you have Eldritch Horror, you have Last Night on Earth, you have Elder Sign. Basically, any of these games are all about chucking dice and hoping that your dice chucking is going to be better than the hordes of the evils that are coming against you. All these games are great if you just want to get your friends over, turn down the lights, turn up the haunted music, and play a thematic game. All these games fit great. Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, Last Night on Earth, Elder Sign. Those are 4 great games that we've already mentioned in various different parts of the list that are great for thematic gaming. One of the few good classic tropes of horror is the trope of survival. If you're not having the trope of survival, then you're probably missing one of the strong things that are all about horror itself. Horror is all about surviving against the odds, survival against the great unknown, and trying to avoid death or destruction from some great horrible monstrosity that you don't know was out there. And that's why we're now going to cover survival games, starting first with Kingdom Death Monster. Kingdom Death Monster is a game for 1 to 4 players designed by Adam Poots, and, well, the publisher is Kingdom Death. Yeah, we just keep it simple here. But this is a survival horror style game where the players are going to be playing cooperatively versus a game that you are trying to keep your survivalists, not survivalists, but basically your little town of survivors alive in a horrible world that really, if you want to be perfectly honest, it feels like purgatory. This is basically purgatory of the game is the best way to theme it, because you are going to be trying to survive in this purgatory style world where everything is against you. You lack food, you lack supplies, you lack clothing, you lack weapons, and you must go out there and hunt monstrosities and beasts. Defeat these monstrosities and beasts to make armor, to make weapons in an effort to survive longer, to help keep your burgeoning little village from surviving against all these horrible monstrosities. It's a very interesting, very unique game where it plays through 2 different phases. Your first phase is the survival of your village. Then your second phase is where you're going to take a couple survivors and go out there and hunt versus something. Whether it's some monstrous jackalope, some monstrous lion, some weird, strange, demonic thing, you're hunting it down to try to get the supplies you need to keep your village going. It's a very interesting take on the survival style game. There's a lot of gameplay here, a lot of mechanics, and a lot of, I don't want to say randomness, but it can feel a little bit brutal, especially if you ever played games such as This War of Mine or anything like that, or it can feel like a little bit randomly brutal. Well, that's kind of the style of the game here. This is a game that's trying to kick you in the teeth constantly. You're just trying to survive the horrors that the game is bringing forward. That's Kingdom Death Monster. Next up in the survival aspect is going to be Dawn of the Zeds. Now, we've already covered Dawn of the Zeds. It's a 1 to 5 player game. It's from Victory Point Games, and it's a tower defense game where you're trying to survive the zombie hordes, going down various different tracks in their effort to come upon your village. You must send your heroes, your burgeoning heroes, out among these tracks to defeat the hordes, put up barricades, do everything you can to survive while you're slowly working against time, because you have the time pressures of the game where you're trying to survive multiple different scenarios and multiple different difficulties. It truly is a survival game of the zombie apocalypse. That's Dawn of the Zeds. And then finally, in our survival category, we have Carnival Zombie. We've already covered Carnival Zombie as a game for 1 to 6 players about surviving the zombie apocalypse over 3 days. If you manage to escape before those 3 days are over, well, life may not be wonderful for you unless you drop the holy bomb and defeat the Leviathan. Otherwise, you're just running to the next city over. And you know what? There's an expansion that allows you to play that city as well. But that's the game of Carnival Zombie, a game of survival, a wonderful dexterity game, a very challenging game, a game that can be very, very brutal at times, but it's a game that offers lots of variety, lots of replay, and it does play all the way up to 6 players cooperatively. Carnival Zombie. We're coming down to the wire now. 2 more categories. First up is going to be worker placement. On top of the worker placement category is going to be Abomination, the Heir of Frankenstein. Abomination, the Heir of Frankenstein is a game for 2 to 4 players by Dan Blanchett, published by Plaid Hat Games. This was a brutally underappreciated game when it came out, and this is a wonderful worker placement game. This game marries the mechanics of a worker placement game with the dark, gruesome theme of the traditional Mary Shelley's version of Frankenstein, not the modernized, glorified Hollywood version. No, this is a darker, the Jack the Ripper version, where the players are scientists being, let's say, forcefully inspired to create another Frankenstein's monster by a very dark force who's forced them to do so. And if they fail to do so, their lives are forfeit. So to do so, our players must play a worker placement game where they must go out there and find the body parts. Well, you know, body parts aren't just laying out there, so sometimes you have to do some dark and gruesome things to get those body parts. Maybe you're going to go visit a slaughterhouse and get a pig heart because you won't feel too guilty about that. Maybe you'll go visit a morgue. Maybe you're going to pay off a doctor because you need a little bit better body parts. Because the interesting thing about this game is you're managing locations as a worker placement game, but you're also managing resources. You're also managing time because these body parts are expiring. And you must work quickly to put these body parts together, build the flesh, build the muscles, build the skeletal system of this monster, this new Frankenstein monster, in an effort to win the game and curry the favor of this dark force that wants you to do its bidding. The interesting thing about this game is there's a nice storyline that's going on that's randomized every time you play the game by a set of cards that are going to be different every time you play the game. They're going to be the story of the dark force and the inspectors hunting the dark force and trying to let you know that you need to stop what you're doing. You're playing with fate and you're also bringing about darkness. It's a darker themed game. It does play it a little bit longer, I'm not going to lie, but this game has so much theme. It's a wonderful worker placement game. Absolutely fantastic for 2 to 4 players. My biggest gripe is I would love this game play with 5 because then I can get it to the table a heck of a lot more. Well, that's the Heir of Frankenstein. A wonderful, wonderful game, the game of abomination. Evil High Priest is a worker placement game for 2 to 5 players, designed by Lincoln Peterson, Sandy Peterson, and published by Peterson Games. This was a game that took the worker placement game and kind of added a very interesting twist. In a lot of worker placement games, you're doing your darndest to go out there and get resources, and then your resources are safe. Not in this game. In this game, you are sending out your dark priest to go out there and get your resources, and then you must bring your resources back and protect them in your inner sanctum, because your resources in this game are interesting. Your resources you use to do things, but your resources are also going to be your victory points at the end of the game. Not only that, you must protect your resources because investigators are going to invade your cultist hideouts at various different stages of the games. And if you don't protect your resources that are dual purpose, your victory points and what you use to go out there and do other things, then you're losing victory points and you're losing resources. So it's this interesting mechanic of a game where you're doing your worker placement that we've all seen before, but you have to protect those resources by calling on the evils of the great old ones, by using your various different powers of your cultists and various different things, and trying to make sure that your cultists aren't locked back up in the asylum where you have to break them out again. The game has some really cool aspects to it, including the fact that every time you play, you're going to pick a different cult track. Every cult track you play is going to make the game play out differently, and it's going to make a different style of gameplay, still based on a more traditional worker placement game. Evil High Priest is a fantastic game. It's another one of those games that I think was greatly underappreciated, and it's one of those games that I hope comes back into print because it's a really great, wonderful take on the worker placement game. That's Evil High Priest. And finally, wrapping things up, we have the family gaming category, because we've been talking a lot of games, some darker, some very dark, but sometimes we just want to play board games with our family, especially our younger ones, on Halloween. And here's 2 great games to be playing with our family. The first one is going to be the Horrified or the Universal Monsters game. These are nice, simpler games. There's nothing dark about these games at all. The mechanics are easy to teach. It's basically Pandemic plus a couple monsters. You're trying to do some various different things to defeat these monsters. It works really well. It's easy to explain to the younger gamers without having to be afraid that you're going to be scaring them or terrifying them with games such as, oh, I don't know, Abomination, which I would never play with kids, ever. But it's a great game that's easy to teach. The mechanics are great. There's a lots of replay variety. And the great thing about it is it's a game that has a finite timer, which is one thing that's very important for the younger kids. After about an hour, they kind of go, candy, squirrel, squirrel, candy. It's great to have a game that has a quicker playtime that you can sit down and enjoy at the table. And once they're done, let them have their candy and go run loose around the house, because that's what Halloween's for. And then finally in the kids category, or I should say the family gaming category, is going to be Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter. Flicking games. They're fun. They're great for any ages. They're easy to teach. You simply say, see this disc? Flick it. Hit a zombie. That's how you play the game. It's great because it's easy to teach. It uses manual dexterity, and it's fun for the kids. They have a blast, especially when you drop all the zombies in the zombie tower, and they all fly across the board, and they're going, oh my God, the zombies are everywhere. And the great thing is that you can play the game 100% cooperatively versus the zombies. So you and your family take your team of survivors, try to hunt down the zombies and complete the scenarios. It's a wonderful, great game for families. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this look at some great gaming to play with your family on this Halloween. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. You also feel free to email me off the show board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. If you enjoyed the video, you enjoyed the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just $1 in tip jar. It's a fantastic way to say thank you. Again, remember, I'm approaching my 10-year anniversary with the channel. It'd be absolutely awesome if I get to 10,000 subscribers. Please help me do that by liking, subscribing, and sharing these videos. And as always, thanks for watching.